Look at that. All right, guys, let's get into it. We got a freaking loaded group today. We got, oh man, I got to go through the list. We got Doug Cook, we got Red, Justin, we got Pete Harrell, Doug from Motion Race, or Andy from Motion Raceworks, and Lyle Barnett. Guys, we're going to talk about Snowbirds today. There's a lot going on. You guys have been testing for what, 3 days now already at this point?
Yep.
Have you done anything? Have you done anything good yet in testing? Is it going?
I think so. I think so.
I
think so.
I know. That one might work a little better for you.
Yeah, you might be close.
Yeah. Sorry, guys, if mics are a little bit of a kind of a cluster at this point, but I got 4 mic inputs and 6
Used them
people.
all up.
Yeah. So how's testing been going?
I think
Your
it's going
LDR?
pretty good. I think it's going pretty good. I mean, that's like I said, learning a lot every run. Haven't just made that stellar A to B pass, but we're getting a little closer and taking some pretty big steps.
So in LDR, what do you need to run to be front runner right now, do you think, in LDR?
With the weather like it is this weekend, probably need to go an 87 or an 88.
387.
387 or a 388, and that's at 3,300. We were 3,350 pounds yesterday.
Gosh, dang, that's a freaking heavy car.
Yeah, that's just what we have to weigh. So
Yeah.
But yeah, I think with the weather like it is, that's what you're going to have to go. There's going to be some cars that probably can't get there, and there's going to be some cars that probably can surpass that. I don't know. There's a lot of cars not going to make it down here for parts availability reasons, but that's what we're shooting for.
So this kind of goes for everybody, though. What are you looking at with weather for this deal? Because it's going to be pretty cool, and Bradenton track temp doesn't usually see that kind of temperatures.
Sure, you can see that they struggle a little bit with it when the track is really cool, but I think the coolest part of the week is about over. I think it's actually supposed to warm up, so we'll see.
How do you pro mod guys feel about that?
Well, the telltale sign to know the weather conditions and how they're affecting, especially the pro mod guys, is walk through the pits at night and see how many of them got the heads pulled off. You know, like Tuesday night. I mean, it was unrealistic, really. It was almost not worth running. It was so good. You know, we saw a barometer we don't usually see ever. I think Tuesday afternoon it was minus 1,400 feet or something crazy like that. And there were some people hauling ass, but come race day, like, you're not going to use any of that data. I mean, I saw some guys unload, go personal best, and put it right back in the trailer. And Steve Petty, who's tuning the car I'm driving this week, is like, dude, you got to learn how to go fast or learn how to turn that down, you know, because you're not going to be able to do that come Sunday morning. And the same thing for Red and those guys in LDR. They may go 85 or 86 Friday night, but come Sunday morning, that 85 or 86 is going to be a 95 or a 96 at best, you know, and you've got to be really careful. You can get in left field in a hurry, especially in the pro mod stuff, and come race day be completely lost when you see weather swings like this. So fortunately for us, well, for everybody, for the rest of the week, it looks like it's going to kind of level out and be more like it normally is down here. But so far this week, it's just been completely unrealistic.
The good and bad part about Snowbirds is kind of like World Cup, but the problem with these guys is they actually have rule sets that are really strict, and people live and die by them. So Snowbirds, you're going to set some records and possibly cause yourself a lot of problems for next season if you go real fast and kind of show your cards. So
so
you
people
can go
have to
fast.
think about next season, because if you hang your nuts out and you go a personal best, and John Sears sees that, he's going to add some lead to your car.
Yeah, the thing about LDR is it was designed to be like a good old boys class that, like, hey, your car doesn't fit Radio Versatile World, but like, hey, we'll take these cars that people don't want to change and turn into some tube chassis car. But now it's become so competitive. Some of these races, you'll have 50 or 60 cars show up, and these guys, they're just wringing the motors out. I mean, from when Red started till now, we went from having no spares of anything to spare motor, spare transmission, spare converter.
Yeah.
So it went from like a budget-oriented class where you can just go and have fun to let's just run this thing on a ragged edge every pass, because that's just a natural progression.
Well, I don't know if it's a budget situation.
It seemed like it originally. Well, originally it seemed like it.
I think it's more of a. I mean, when they set the rules, you're like, well, you can only go this fast with these parts, and these parts should do that no problem. But that was 2.5 tenths ago in ET. You know what I mean? So that's where the extra parts and et cetera.
Do you look at your engine builder and tuner at that one and you're like, hey, I know you built them for this, but
gosh,
Maybe.
You know, I can remember the first.
That's this guy.
Yeah, that's the infielder and tuner.
Beats had to learn to become a master of turning chicken shit into chicken salads.
Yeah.
My job description.
Well, you've done a great job with Garrett on that. I think that's where a lot of the people that watch this will know of you from is your work with Garrett and those guys. But let me quickly say what Snowbirds is. So Snowbirds is kind of the last event of the season for you guys, right? Because you wouldn't consider it first, even though it's kind of like right there. It's the last event of the season. It's when everybody really tries to do something cool, tries to win that money. It's not part of the points series, right? It's not part of the points for small tire.
Yep.
But they also include the Night of Fire. And if you've never seen the Night of Fire, I highly recommend you make it down to Bradenton to see that, because no amount of video or live coverage will replicate jet cars going 300 miles an hour and blowing the concrete into the pond 2 streets away from Bradenton. So
I don't
We got a story about that, actually.
I don't know how many of you have seen the guys that kind of hang around us when we race, but we've all got a buddy who'll be here later. His name's Josh Udy. And he's probably, I don't know what, 6'1" or something, 275.
Every bit of 250,
You know,
275.
I mean, he's corn-fed, whole milk. and
non-soy milk.
None of that 1% pussy.
No, I don't know if it was probably 2 years ago. Within the past 3 years, we were there,
Yep.
and of course, Garrett's like, "Man, you guys should come stand in the middle of the track, like between the little concrete walls, And at the time, you're like, "Yeah, this sounds like a good idea," until you turn around and that transfer truck's coming at you, with a fucking big jet engine stuck through the middle of it. So we duck down, and that thing takes off, and it picks Josh Udy up off of his fucking feet, and throws him into every. I mean, he's
I was wearing Josh Udy.
knocking people over, trash cans over, half the concrete wall. You know, and I was like, this is the last time I'm in the middle of the racetrack during jet car, jet truck, whatever.
Immediately regretted that decision.
Absolutely, 100%.
I didn't really think jet cars were that cool until I saw that semi.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
And
seeing a video doesn't do it justice.
Absolutely
You have to be
not.
there when you feel them bumping in, and it's like a shockwave to the whole facility of Bradenton, and you just get hit with this.
Even being in front of it, like if you're gonna go and experience that, I mean, don't stand behind it.
That was
right?
stupid.
But off to the side where you can kind of understand what they do to the air and the shit behind them, it's unbelievable. They have to stop traffic.
What was weird about that thing is, when it took off, it was like a lot of force, but it didn't blow Josh Udy into me until it was about half track.
Yes,
that's when
300
that's when the pressure came, when it got like half track, and you're like, how can the pressure travel that far
Well,
back?
they're just starting to get into it. Like, those jet engines aren't at efficiency until 400 miles an hour, which they never even see. So they're.
But to think that the pressure can travel 600 feet and then knock you over, it doesn't even seem to add up. But yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, it's wild.
Yeah. So if you've never seen the jet stuff, I highly recommend you go. What is it? Friday and Saturday night they do it?
I think it's just Saturday.
Saturday night they do the Night of Fire.
Night of Fire, yep.
So all the jet engines are out there, and it's truly a must experience type of event. And then, of course, there's some drag racing as well.
Sure.
Which you guys probably can tell us all about.
Yeah, Friday and Saturday night in qualifying, that's kind of when everybody lets their nuts hang out.
Absolutely.
From Pro Mods to LDR, it's something. It's like a home run derby, really.
When you qualify for this race, you make your run Friday night. If you miss it Friday night, you're not going to qualify you may not qualify to your full potential if you miss it on Friday night.
So you got to be there Friday night to watch stuff go fast.
Every race I've ran here in Pro Mod, we have made the run on Friday night. And that's if you're. Not all 52, I think, are on the list. Not all of them are here. But, if you miss it Friday night, then you may miss the show, come
Yeah, because there's 52 cars and what is it, a 32-car field?
32-car field,
Yeah,
yeah.
so a lot of people get that cut, and that's crazy to think that there's that number in Pro Mod to begin with, that there are 52 cars that are within, 5 numbers of each other in the end of the day, and then people are just fighting to get into the field. Last year, there was some big upsets as well, right?
Well, and that's like I was talking about earlier, when the air is this good, and you make the run on Friday night, come Sunday, if you can just get in, nobody on this list that'll qualify for the 32-car field, just because you're the number one or in the top 8 does not mean you're going to make it past first round, much less win the race.
Well,
if you can just get in,
The World Series wasn't Spencer at like the bottom of the field?
He was,
and then he won.
32nd. He was. If he wasn't the last qualifier, he was somewhere. I mean, he was way down there. And
But
that's
it's just
what I'm saying.
anybody's race as long as you're in.
And the reason he was down there is because he missed the run. When we all qualified, when we all made our qualifying shot, I mean, I went 66 in the Roots car, and I was like 22nd or something like that. Number one went 61, and Spencer went 68 or something like 69.
And it's crazy. Those big floppy tires are dead, is what I hear.
Oh yeah.
And there's 52 cars.
Come on out there,
And there'll be 52 cars out there trying to get in.
From a tuner's standpoint, like in Pete's shoes, and I guess really is a question for Pete, when you consider you've got one shot, how much of a risk do you take? Like if you know that I have to go fast here, but also can't knock the tire off, are you somewhat conservative?
Grab that mic.
Or do you go for gold and try to get it done?
I would say that kind of depends where you're at in qualifying to start with. Yeah. If you're kind of on the outside looking in, then I'm looking more of a chip shot to at least get something decent, right? But if I've got something decent in the bag, then I'm going to throw some at it because what do you got to lose? So that's kind of how I would look at that.
And do you even care, like if you're 32 qualifier, does that even matter to you because you're so close to number one with the spread that it's almost like, in most racing, if you're bottom qualifier, the guy that's number one is probably a half a second faster than you in like my style of racing. But then in this, everybody's so close anyways, it's almost just like a roll of the dice.
Well, to some extent, but usually like the problem is your first round is probably not going to be in the best conditions, right? And that spread may open up, and they may have a better, in the sun type tune-up than you do. So, yeah, it still matters because, even though it's maybe say a 5-number spread or something, they're probably better at running close to that spot they're in, consistently. And that, unless you got a driver that can consistently drill it and they have one that consistently can't, then it's probably going to matter,
Well, and like Pete said, that early in the day when the track is what you would call green, like lane choice is big, right? Especially in the first couple rounds, it could turn into a one-lane racetrack overnight. If they, I don't know, maybe some dew set in or it could have possibly rained or whatever. When you show up for eliminations on Sunday morning, it could be a one-lane racetrack, and that could determine the first couple of rounds if they ever get it right. Like we were just in South Georgia, and it was kind of a one-lane racetrack there on race day, and you could just about guarantee that if you did not have lane choice, it probably wasn't going to go your way.
Yeah, in radio racing, it's worse in that regard because like you can have a couple guys in front of you knock the tires off trying to beat the faster qualified cars, and then the worst lane turns into the way worse lane really quick, and like if you're in a better spot, then you can switch lanes or do what you need to do. But if you're not, then you have to take what you're given.
Cooper, I think you had a thought about how to even the playing field for pro mod.
I was wondering, me and Doug were talking before, and I was hoping somebody runs out there when Lyle pulls up with a flashlight to.
We thought that might even the playing field a little bit.
Help it out a little bit.
Yeah, just tell them, take one more step in the groove, I'll just run your ass over.
Run them over.
Just shut it off.
How do you read a track when they're running radials and slick tires? Is it completely different than like?
Well, I would say, like down here, Wade does a really good job. Like in some places, really struggle with doing that. It's not easy, but I think since they started doing that, what the track guys have figured out is the most important part of that is the run order. Yeah. And they figured out, all right, well, let's, start here, and then as the track goes away, we'll glue it. Then as it goes away, it'll be back to where the pro mods are happy on it. So
these races have been happening long enough, too, at these bigger tracks that I think people, racers, crew, tuners, whatever, trust that the track's going to be to this level. It always is to this level, so that's the level it's going to be to. If for some reason it's not to that level, then you deal with it, but you just trust that it's going to be.
I think that's why people like coming to Bradenton, because it's almost always on point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not one of those tracks that's hit or miss. Like, you can just trust that Wade's got it right.
Well, it seemed like at World Cup they struggled with that a little bit, the radial prep and the slick tire prep, whereas the radial guys almost needed to completely change what they were planning to do.
Yeah,
Super cold up there too. So in
Yeah,
that,
it's complicated up there because they intermix stuff so much. Like, and that's where Garrett's going to kind of get screwed over because they kicked him out of one class and put him with mullet into basically like a pro mod class. So in front, and he may have to go behind 10 slick tire cars before his pass. And a car with a 116-inch wheelbase now has no glue left, so it's just there's no way it's going to work.
Well, he does have the same engine and turbo combo as Mark Mickey, right? Isn't it the same, pretty much the same power setup,
Not
same
anymore.
cubic inch and
Bigger
everything?
turbos for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean,
But there's only a handful of guys in the country, and I won't name any because I'll forget one, but that are capable of prepping a track for both anyway. You know,
Yeah.
like there are people that try to do it, or tracks that try to do it, and like they said, I could probably name maybe 3 or 4 that are capable of doing it, and they do a good job here. But with the pro mod stuff, Tyler Crossnow really started this trend with the PDRA a couple years ago. He made the prep better and better and better, and now your diehard pro mod guys, Todd Tutterow, even Ricky Smith and those guys have kind of learned and figured out how to run on these better prep racetracks. Because for the longest time, a really good pro mod track was absolutely not a radial track.
Yeah, I was about to say
in
that
any way,
like,
shape, or form.
That's one of the biggest differences. The pro mod guys that are down here this weekend can run on a much tighter track, where even a couple years ago they would have been raising hell.
Yeah, and that's partly because Tyler Crossnow, and I don't know if he did it on purpose to kind of plan for this or what, but he started that because when he first started doing it, there were some guys up in arms a bit about it, like the track is way too tight.
Yeah.
And Tyler stood his ground, and now when these races down here happen and they can intermix some of that radial stuff when they were doing that in PDRA, the pro mod guys are happy and can run fast, and the radial guys are happy and can run fast, and it does make for a better show. But I credit Tyler Crossnow to that for the most part when he started that in the PDRA, which is most of your fast guys down here, that's where they run most of the time. There's very few of them that cross over to NHRA, but the 8th mile pro mod prep has gotten significantly better just in the past 2 to 3 years than it used to be.
on a tight track, would you say the pro mods get into tire shake? Because that's what it seems like the big tire cars were doing on Sick Week is, you know, on these tight tracks, they would get into tire shake and then they would just start breaking trans parts or something along those lines.
Yeah,
probably,
you know, the radial cars absolutely 100% have to stick the tire and drive off. And if a pro mod car sticks the tire, it's hard to get it back round again, because when it sticks it just wides it up.
Right.
You know, and it's hard to get it back round. We need to slip it when we let go of the button. It needs to spin over. You know, it needs to spin. Literally, it's a controlled spin for most of the run. And when you stick a pro mod tire, it's really hard to get it back around. The only way to do it is to either try to slow it down some or just overpower it. And then most of the time, you end up in tire shake anyway. But shock technology, converter technology, transmission and stuff, like the way that they run these cars now, there's many more ways to fix that. You know, we've learned how to run on these tighter tracks, and keeping the tire round is not as hard to do anymore.
And when you guys shake tires, you break stuff bad, right?
Yeah, this is the first
chassis.
The first weekend that I've driven for the Pro Line guys, and I think the second or third run yesterday, mine went out and shook the tires. I mean, like, it's as hard a tire shake as I've had in a while, and it broke a chassis tab and kicked a puck of weight off. You know, shot it over to the wall. And the tire shake is terrible on these things. It'll break wheelie bars, 4-link brackets. You know, you shake one 2 or 3 times in a row, and it's time to put it on the Pro Jacks and take it apart and start looking, because you've more than likely broke something somewhere.
As a driver, how much responsibility do you kind of bear for that? Or does it just happen so quickly that it's almost like...
I mean, your only responsibility at that point is to get out of the throttle before that thing's in the wall.
But if, like, you know, somebody stays in it through the tire shaker, as a driver, is that kind of on them a little bit? Or is it like you understand because it happens in such, like...
You just have to learn how to drive them with a seat of your pants. You know, a lot of the first 100 feet of the run, you know, I like to call it driving with the bottoms of my legs. You know, you can just feel what the tire's doing, and you just got to know what tire shake you can drive through and what you can't. You know, it was very obvious yesterday I wasn't driving through any of that. I mean, it was top fuel in the tire. But I've been at this race and driven through some tire shake that probably should have aborted, and it made it. You know, now it slowed it down 8 or 9 numbers. But it's just laps, man. You just got to make laps in those things and understand that some tire shake is okay. And on a really good run, they'll quiver some the first 100 feet. and then you just got to know when to abort ship. You know, it's just seat time, dude.
Probably depends too whether you're in actual eliminations or testing.
100%. Yeah, you're not. If it goes out there and quivers them pretty hard, unless you're on the outside looking in, most of the time we just abort. But in eliminations, obviously and that's when you'll get in trouble. We saw that's Chris Thorne's car on the screen there, and in NHRA this year, he was running for a championship. His car got out of shape in E1, and it ended up on its lid. And that's another part of driving those things. You just got to know when to give it up. You can get yourself in a lot of trouble in eliminations in those things when it matters, and they get out of shape. Because if they're in the groove, you can kind of drive them around. If they get a tire out, they can end up. They'll be on their lid before you can do anything about it.
Well, and when somebody says $52,000 to win,
That's right.
You get a little bit more froggy as well. Yeah. If it was just for bragging rights, it probably would be a little more likely to get out of the throttle. What does an LDR car feel like in tire shake? How different is that? Like, throw the mic.
I've never drove a big tire car with big floppy tires on it, so I can't reiterate, but the older radial 315 that we used to run on 5-6 years ago, whatever it was, 7-8 years ago, that thing would shake pretty violent. Obviously tire technology has gotten so much better, so we don't generally deal with it. We generally don't have to deal with it. We're getting after these cars so fast early. And like I said, it's a radial tire, so it doesn't have the ability. I'm not going to say it doesn't have the ability to shake. You just don't deal with it.
Generally, a radial, if it spins, you're just done.
Yeah, exactly.
And if it
exactly.
shakes, you're done, too.
Exactly.
Yeah, there's no recovery process with a radial car.
Yeah, the last radial tire race I watched, it was like every pair on the first round, it was just like one car went down, one car spun, and it was just like, all right, I guess I'll come back for round 2 to watch.
Yep.
Because it's just tough, and especially in the heat of the day.
I've seen radial races where you could drive a Honda Civic like a non-hopped up Honda Civic and win multiple rounds.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
That's the unfortunate part about it.
Last February, I guess, or
Georgia.
Devil Horse, an LDR car won RVW, running 390s.
Oh, wow.
Well, Brian Keep almost won it with Ultra Street.
Yeah.
With an Ultra Street car, he was double entered.
Anything could happen.
Yeah, there's a lot more strategy, I feel like, with the radial, right, Pete?
Yeah, and sometimes in the faster, like it's hard to slow them down. Like you may need to slow down 2/10 or whatever to go down a really greasy track, but sometimes that can actually be easier said than done because that whole car is engineered and set up to be hit hard and jammed on through there. And just turning the knob down doesn't actually work out because you have to kind of re-engineer stuff.
To go fast, you got to move bars, and
Yeah,
to
you'd
slow
have to
down, you'd have to move them right back.
Right, you have to move bars, move weight, change converter, all kinds of stuff. So it sounds really easy, but in actuality, it can be kind of tricky.
It's not a knob turn away for sure.
Right.
Well,
Do you
just like-
rely on traction control much in those deals?
Yeah.
Because it feels like almost to me, if it gets into the traction control, like it's kind of like spinning the tires. You lost.
Well, it depends. So we use it for a lot of things. Sometimes we use the TC to slow the car down, to hold it back in certain spots. But it's always run in the background. Now, when we're trying to go really fast in qualifying or later rounds of eliminations, in a lot of times it can only do so much because you got so much loaded into it that if it slips, a lot of times what people don't understand in these radial cars or slick tire cars too, when the thing slips, what's actually happening is the tire is not on the ground because it's square or so distorted. So when that's the case, like TC's not going to do anything. It doesn't have any way to do anything. It's not touching anything, So it's really complicated. But TC is super effective on Sunday in E1 and 2 when the track's really greasy and you can pull the thing down and keep it running in the background. That's where it really pays off. In this type of racing, other types of racing we do like no prep, it's the opposite. It's everything.
It's more of like a maintainer on radials. It
Right.
really is like a maintainer. You're trying to maintain an ET range with it. You know what I mean? Whereas on a slick tire car where you've got a controlled tire spin most of the trip, then it's there doing exactly what it was designed to. But we use it for a maintainer, and especially when the air is swinging like it does here in Florida. It's 85 one day with 2,500 DA, and it's 65 the next day with 100 foot of DA. You're not going in there twisting a bunch of knobs on the tune-up. You've got something to maintain runs. You know what I mean? And
Yeah,
that makes it easier to manage your information, and it makes it to where you're not touching so many things between rounds. 'Cause the more stuff you touch between rounds, the more possibility there is to forget what to do the next round. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Sometimes, you may not know exactly what you need to do to account for all the air changes and everything that's happened, but you can put that drive shaft path. You do know what a 106 drive shaft path looks like. You know exactly what that looks like. So you can put that in there and miss a little bit on your other stuff and still have it going.
And as in 106, you mean 60 foot?
60 foot,
106, 60 foot.
Right, yeah.
Which is pretty spicy for LDR cars. I mean, that's probably up there in what they run in the 60 foot, right? You guys going into the .9?
Some of the lighter combinations go faster. The heavier combinations, I'd say 102 to 106 range for the heavier combinations.
Yeah, that's a lot of weight to move. Do you even, like, how much 60 foot are you thinking about versus once you get to that level, is it more 330 thinking, or is it still?
It's 60 foot.
60's
everything.
I thought once you're getting that fast, like, you kind of have to start thinking a little bit more
in a
broad.
in a max effort class racing, whether it's Pro Mod, LDR, Ultra Street, these cars have got everything they got by 60 foot. So that is everything.
It's so hard to come back around. It takes way more power than you realize.
Well, the weights and the rules are managed to keep the cars. If you leave at the same time, they should cross the finish line at the same exact time if they're both have perfect runs. So you have to be the 60 foot is where it's all at. You can't catch up from there.
So quarter mile and a big floppy tire. That one kind of was interesting to see. Why was he running it out the back? Just to break the record? I mean, you could tell us all about this.
Yeah,
so Mark Mickey just broke the record with his car.
Yeah, Jose is, he a great driver. Drives in all forms and got cars. He runs it at World Cup and stuff back home. And one of his kind of bucket list deals was to be the fastest man in a quarter mile in a door car. And he has his own car that they were going to try to do that with this year, but Mark Mickey, had a setup ready to go, and people have asked, well, why didn't Mark drive? Well, he doesn't have just true desire to really go that fast, and Jose has tons of experience at those speeds in the quarter mile. Because getting to the finish line, most of us in this room could do, right? If you can hold it to the floor, if you got balls to hold it to the floor. Getting it stopped and learning where the finish line is and where you are on the racetrack is a totally different deal. And people don't think about that. Jose is, like I said, is very good. He's a multi-time champion, won the NHRA Pro Modified World Championship a couple years ago, and a seasoned driver. But you could hold that thing 4/10 past the finish line and be deep in the strawberry patch. I mean, that thing be running 300, And that's what people do not understand is the hardest part of driving a Pro Mod quarter mile is just learning where you are on the racetrack at any given time. Yep. Counting cones as they go by subconsciously, right? Most of the time, it's happening fast, but if you were on the radio, I could tell you where I was, And that is the hardest part driving quarter mile at those speeds.
The thing that people don't understand about that is that 300 mile an hour, you're stopping distance, real estate disappears at an unbelievable rate.
No, absolutely.
So if you hold it down for just a fraction of a second past the stripe, you have gone way into your shutdown area.
Absolutely.
And if you don't have the parachutes out when they're supposed to be out and stop or let out when you're supposed to be out, you can be in trouble real quick.
Yeah, you're not talking about seconds. You're talking about milliseconds.
Yeah, like a parachute takes a second or more to blossom.
Yeah, and if you watch...
At 150, that's one thing, but at 300, a second's coming.
If you watch the video, Jose, and in the end car, he's got the parachutes coming out, and those of us that drive quarter mile pro mods, we all do. As the mile an hour cones coming to the nose, that's when you start getting the parachute out. Now for him, he was getting them out way before that because like Pete said, he was... it said 272 when he crossed the finish line, but by the time that thing actually started decelerating, he was probably running 290, right? And that's what you just don't understand. He didn't go 272 and then immediately go 260, 252. He accelerated for a little bit.
The chutes are untested at that speed as well. So at World Cup, what was it, last year or something? You saw Lutz toss his chutes at high speed, and they were gone. They were just off the car.
That happens about every year up there, usually multiple cars, because they're not prepared the chassis builders sometimes don't really understand the forces involved when that thing hits at that kind of speed. It's just unreal, you know.
Yeah, it's fine at eighth mile, but then once quarter mile
it's
speed.
way different, and I've seen
untested.
a bunch of them get pulled off up there. You know?
And that's scary too, because then you want to have a little bit of extra runway in case you don't feel that tug of the shoe. And I'm sure at 300 it feels pretty serious compared to like, you know, my 170.
And Bradenton's one of the longest tracks out there.
It's pretty long, you know, and the shutdown goes uphill a little bit,
Yeah.
which helps a ton.
Yeah.
There was a camper on the other side of it.
Oh, that was terrifying.
But I talked to Mark Mickey before the run, and he actually Stroud made him parachutes specifically for those runs. They had top fuel tethers on them and a little bigger than what he normally runs, you know. And Jose went 272 or whatever it was, and I wasn't at the top end, but there were some guys down there that said by halfway through the shutdown he was at an idle speed, you know. So they actually did prepare to do this.
That's got to be violent in a car when those both deploy at those speeds.
In a pro mod, I've been 258, and then went 270 and some change in the top alcohol car. And in the pro mod, especially, it's almost disorienting for the first little when you pull those things. You just kind of dangle in the belts for a second, you know, when they really hit hard. Like it can kind of.
Because a lot of top fuel guys like
vision.
detach retinas and stuff. It's
I
that
think it
much
was-
negative, like
I think
5
it
or
was Kenny
something.
Bernstein.
Yep.
But I can't remember. His parachutes came out under power at a good ways down the racetrack. And it separated his retina from his eye. Oh, you know?
Wow.
Yeah.
Does power adder, you think, play a big role in how violent it is? Because that turbo car seems a lot less violent than like the big blower combinations.
Well,
it seems smooth like a turbo would be.
In the blower cars, you're pretty much just along for the ride at the 8th mile in the quarter. And in the same thing in the 8th, you're pretty much just along for the ride at the 330. A half track, the acceleration is over. The G meter is starting to decel, you know. But in the turbo car, they're just now waking up. You know, they pull all the way to the finish line. Like it's unbelievable.
My G meter pretty much falls off like 60 feet out. I just kind of hold on after that. But the turbo car stuff seems so cool. I hope that catches on in the pro mod. I know that it gets a lot of slack and kind of gets made fun of, but I feel like turbo stuff is just, it's so good now.
The E-gates have been the biggest change, you know, and Mark Mickey would tell you the same thing. You know, they're running electronic wastegates on the cold side of the turbo now. You know, they're not, in fact, well, he does have wastegates on the hot side now because they blew some turbos up before they figured out they needed them. But the boost control, and not just with the E-gates, the boost control, these, you know, the new EFI, you know, kind of self-contained Holly or Fuel Tech or Hall Tech or whatever that have boost control in them is so good now. You know, it's way better than when Pete used to do it back in the day, you know. Its staging procedure is way better. There's, you know, technology just came so far. But for the turbo stuff, the E-gate, that new technology is
I was going to say, Pete
the
could probably
biggest
speak on the
change.
E-Gate stuff. You guys had the Dragon Drive car, right? You were.
Yeah, you know, like Lyle said, a lot of times the technology comes from managing the stuff, not the you know, the invention in the first place. And
The
that's where
hardware is the easier part.
things are changing. And still, I think there's a lot to change because some of the, you know, the E-Gate stuff is great, but I don't recommend it for your average street guy. You know, like what Mickey's trying to do with it, and everything is a little different than other stuff. But because there's still a lot to be had in the software development for controlling that. You know, but it can be good for sure.
And they get unhappy with a lot of softwares from what I've seen. I think they developed it with Fuel Tech with the E-Gate stuff, so Fuel Tech's pretty happy with it. I know you're more of a Holly guy, right?
Yeah, well, I've used the Fuel Tech on it too, and you know, it's okay. But the bigger thing that's happened is that we've just people know how to run turbos better nowadays. Like people ask me, which should I go, you know, turbo or supercharger, and I generally tell them that the supercharger is easier to manage power with because timing just works so effectively, and that's why so many guys like it, because in a drag race application, it's all about managing power, and with the blower, it's just super easy to do. It's easier to do, in my opinion, but it's easier to produce gobs of power with a turbo. Like with a turbo, the truth is anybody can make a ton of power, right? But where the expertise comes in is harnessing and, you know, being able to rein that power in, generate exactly what you want on the starting line every time. That's a trick, you know, and it takes a little bit of know-how, and that's where a lot of guys that's where progress has been made over the past 10 years. The boost controllers are better. The transmissions and converters are better. We can stage way easier than when I started. We used to have all kinds of crazy stuff we did to get in the beams, and nowadays that's just nobody has that problem,
But I think it became a bit of a problem, back in especially when I first started racing, there was a bunch of independent, I would call them independent teams. If we all had a race car, we pretty much all tuned our own shit, right? And anymore, because of the advancement in the technology and what it takes to harness all the power, like Pete said, like it takes, we call them super tuners. It takes a Pete, a Steve Petty, a Jamie Miller, a Justin Elks. And if you walk through the pits,
They're everywhere.
especially this weekend, 75% of the Pro Mod cars are tuned by one of probably 6 people, right?
Yeah, right. When I started, there wasn't hardly such thing as a tuner,
Right.
or let alone a super tuner.
But that's literally what it takes today,
Yeah,
like,
right. Now
You
they're
graduate
everywhere.
into a super tuner and didn't tell them about it.
Man, get you a
Sounds like
cape.
sounds like a new T-shirt to
Getting
me.
this first.
Yeah,
You're just
Get
down
you
here
a cape for
first.
this weekend.
Yeah.
Justin, that budget deal we were talking about earlier, Justin's just went up.
I actually added Victor wasn't here, so I added him to this too. Pro mod driver guy,
Oh yeah,
because he's a big pro mod guy these days.
Yeah.
I think that really messed him up after driving that one time.
100%. He's ruined now.
Yep.
That's why I can't drive anything fast. I know it's going to ruin me. I prefer to go slow.
Yeah, the way my bank account's set up.
Exactly. I mean, Lyle, I think in a year we watched Lyle deal with that exact thing.
Yeah.
He drove something real fast, 2 years ago, and now it's like
I'm fucked.
just pro mod only.
I remember Lyle stayed at my house when he was getting his pro mod license down here. It was like after US Street or before US
It
Street.
was this race.
Yeah, I feel like it changed you as a person.
It did.
He
You
just-
came home like
He
you
didn't get no
left.
better looking. That's
You
for sure.
left. You went to the track. You came home, and I felt like something else entered your body.
Came back home with tattoos, smoking Marlboro Reds.
Yeah. With the Scotty Cannon glasses on.
I'm here to fuck shit up.
Yeah.
If pro mod was truly unlimited, would everybody just have turbos at that point, or
They either have
No.
turbos or a screw blower. And I think if Donald Long Duck does this run what you brung type race or whatever you want to call it, 200,000 to win, that's all that. Well, there may be some pro charge stuff, but there will be no nitrous cars. There will be no roots cars. It will be turbos, screw blowers, and possibly some pro charger stuff. But,
that's what it kind of feels like? They slow down the other combos to make it fair for.
well, they have
a
to.
couple different
if
combos.
it was if you could bring just whatever you wanted here and there were no minimum weights, it would just be full of screw blowers
That would be
and
a
like 2
wild
turbo
class.
cars. You know what I mean?
Well, they just came out with the new Pro Charger, 139 or something?
Yeah,
it's a pretty big dog.
F4X or whatever
Yeah.
it is. Yeah, and I don't know that you can run one here. I know we don't have it on
Does
the car
putting
I'm
the
driving.
weight in that spot help a lot, I feel like?
Well,
Instead of like
in
a
the-
screw blower where it's like up above the center
Well,
line of
it
the car.
It makes it more difficult if that weight is farther out and low. With that screw blower sitting on top of the motor and being back, it's easier to transfer the weight. And that's everything in these things. Get them back on the wheelie bars so that you can get them off the starting line.
Well,
So
I think the cars have kind of evolved that way because for years everybody had a roots or a blower or
Right,
a screw,
right.
and like the whole thing worked around having that weight there,
Yeah.
and it's a big change when you move it down and forward.
Yeah.
Interesting, because I would think on like a radial car you would want the weight.
Oh, in a radio car you do.
Yeah.
Or well,
To
more
a
so.
certain extent, even that's even changed.
Yeah, something I noticed on whenever the pro mod entries started building cars for Pro Charger power adders, the ride height on the Pro Charger cars looks to be higher than the screw blower, roots blower cars.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You can, when they're pushing through the pits, you can look and the ride height looks higher. You know what I mean?
Yeah, probably is.
So I want
That's-
to understand the other classes a little bit more and help people understand the, Pro 275, X 275, LDR. Like, what are the differences for if I'm sitting in the stands watching, what really kind of tells these cars apart? What are some of the defining rules of these classes? Why is somebody in Pro 275 versus X 275?
I mean, honestly, to know the difference, you just have to know the difference anymore. I mean, you can tell when the scoreboards light up, but if they pulled, even an Ultra Street car on the starting line beside an X275 car and you had to tell me which one would which, you couldn't. You just have to know who's in it,
Yeah.
Right.
And they were all created, Outlaw Drag Radial was really the class back in the day, and when the bottom half of the field got tired of running with David Wolf and Stevie and all those guys, they created Pro 275, and when that got fast, they created something else. So they're all just a step down.
They're kind of just layered on top of each other where they slow down as you go.
Yeah.
The biggest thing would be the power production limitations, right? Like an X car, is limited to say an 88 millimeter turbo and maybe an F1X blower or whatever, where an LDR car gets 2 of those turbos essentially and a totally different blower. So the power, even though the car looks very similar and in a lot of ways works very similar, the power potential is drastically different.
But make no mistake. I mean, you take a top tier ultra street team that runs up front in ultra street, whether I think they're in the mid to high 40s right now, 440s. Just because they're in ultra street don't mean they can't go to X and play by the X rules and run right up front in X. You know what I mean?
A lot of
you
those
can't.
Ultra Street guys are great racers.
Yeah, you can't talk down to the class below you, because I've seen it many a times that they move up, the cream always rises to the top. I mean, the same goes for everything. Them guys work hard.
Essentially, Ultra Street's the slowest class. X275,
like
X270,
right?
Yeah, 440, 450. X275 goes 20s, 420s, 430s, sometimes teens. Yeah. And then LDR is like your last Mohican, if you will. Like it's the last steel-bodied car that looks like a real car, and they're on a 295 tire, and they're going high 3s. And then Pro 275 is basically a pro mod with a radial on it, with a small radial. So,
not that it really matters, but the coolest kind of distinction I think of all of them is LDR is ran on a DOT approved tire, like a legit DOT number on the side. Yeah. So
Those look like.
So I mean, if I got to drive home, I can.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
He did drive
Legally,
around
I
the
can
neighborhood
drive
the other day.
Yeah.
Those cars look like street cars.
That's the essence of it. It looks like a real, I think that's why LDRs become so popular. If you see Paul Gargas's car or Reds or Chad Henderson's, you're like, that looks like a Grand National. That looks like a Nova. It doesn't look like some stretched out mess, which that's cool if you're going fast, but people, like little kids come up and see a real muscle car, they're like, this is cool. And then when it goes
it's relatable.
No one that cracks off a 383/90, they're like, that's even cooler. So,
Boys, I got to get to the racetrack. Coop, I appreciate it. Y'all
Hey,
stay at
thanks
it,
for coming on, brother. Hey, sign the board before you walk out.
Sweet.
Appreciate you coming, man. Go win or go do something cool at least.
Oh, we're going to do good.
Yeah, so we were talking about all kinds of different things. Traction control, where were we before Lyle completely interrupted everybody to walk out?
Hold on, what about fajitas? Do we got to ask him about fajitas?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I could give my opinion on fajitas. I've never done it before. I don't really enjoy a show,
Right.
Dinner and a show?
If they came out like tacos, perfectly fine with
And
it.
that's my deal.
I don't need a show. I don't need everybody to look at me. I'd prefer if you didn't put me in the corner.
Who's the
You
guy
don't
on
need
TikTok?
to.
Is it Dane the Great?
Dane the Great.
I mean, are we going to cook these right
Yeah,
here?
we're going to cook them right. They still cook. They got a good sizzle.
Just
They got
bring
a
them
good
out as
sizzle.
tacos, and I'm happy.
Yeah. I mean,
They don't
my
need
wife
any.
does great crock pot fajitas, right? But when I get home,
So what you're saying now is that you do like fajitas as long as they don't come out still
The flavor's
sizzling.
fine.
it's the sizzle and the show.
So like if we order some and have them sent to the table behind us, and
then
then
you-
I just grab a scoop and throw them in front of you, you're eating them.
I'm good.
I don't need to make my own tacos at the table.
Right.
Well,
yeah.
this is a
Make it for
perpetual
me.
conversation for the Shake and Bake podcast. So
Yes.
if you enjoy this fajita
Yeah.
conversation,
If you like fajitas, and fuck you.
Great plug. Go check out Shake and Bake. You want to switch chairs?
I can, yeah.
Yeah, might as well. You don't need to sit on the folding
And
one.
he gets his own mic now.
man, moving on up.
Yeah, look at this. All right, guys, I wanted to interrupt this real quick to say if you enjoy what we're doing here, I only ask one thing. Hit that subscribe button. It means a lot. It helps us grow, and we can keep this thing going. Now, let's get back to the podcast. Thank you guys so much for the continued support. So where should we go from here? Talking about power adders. Lyle, I was going to ask him about, beef in racing, because I feel like he loves that as the shit talking and coming at other drivers. Does it happen in LDR at all? I feel like that's a pretty good group of guys where they all kind of just sit around the campfire.
Yeah,
that's kind of more of a campfire group, I feel like.
I don't notice any of the shit talking in any of the classes other than just Lyle in the That's it.
just Lyle.
Yeah, it's just Lyle.
It's literally Lyle
It
on an
was-
island.
Yeah, it was Stevie, and then it's just Lyle. So
We're hoping Stevie comes back with, a little bit of
that's
the
true.
old
That's
school
true.
shit talking.
I think too the age group. Like most of these max effort class racing, these guys are older, So it just means something different to him. Lyle's young, very competitive. I'm not saying everybody's not competitive, but I think that's where a lot of it comes from. Plus, he's just trying to keep the pot stirred, man. It makes it interesting.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? He's doing it for a job, so it means something different to him than it means for me or him racing his own car. You know what I mean?
I kind of do it for a job. I mean, I don't race for a job.
Well, that's
but-
what I meant.
Yeah.
Oh, I can't race for a job. I would be living on the street for sure.
Yeah.
I don't win enough for that.
Yeah, even though that 52,000's up there, make no mistake, that's a losing number still.
Oh,
100%.
For the week and the weekend, like,
makes sense.
sure.
yeah.
Well, if you
I
win
mean, if you
LDR
wanna-
7,500, that's profit,
Yeah.
right? That's
Yeah.
like 7,000 profit from your weekend.
Well, actually, the entry fee is only $300, so it's $7,200.
Yeah, after you pay the
wanna get
tuner.
that. Oh, yeah.
Red's been here
Yeah.
since Sunday. I think.
Yeah.
His
Yeah.
bank account might say otherwise.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine.
We did a YouTube video about that one time, and it was completely unscripted. And we were like, "What's the real cost of LDR?" And it was one of our best YouTube videos on the Motion channel because literally before you know it, we had the motor apart on Red's car, on top of fuel tires, getting there and all that stuff. And Pete's like straightening valves with a hammer, with a ball peen hammer in a vise, and that worked okay. But then we had to pull the motor out, send back with Pete because it's just the growing and learning about you start pushing this stuff harder. I don't think people truly will ever understand the cost of this stuff. It's crazy.
They won't. There is such a. That's what the coolest thing about drag racing I think of is the passion that the people have, because those numbers and payouts, we appreciate them, but none of that's life changing. I mean, especially when you're talking about the guy that's Chris. I mean, them teams are heavily funded teams. So $52,000.
The Ultra Street payout's
Yeah.
the same as LDR.
Yeah.
Yeah, and,
Yep.
and I'll argue even like the World Series of Pro Mod when they're beating their chest about like $100,000 payout, that's still a losing
Yep.
proposition.
Well, yeah, because only one guy's going home with that.
Yeah.
One
Like,
guy's going
there's
home with
50,
it,
60
and like
cars.
when you start seeing billet Hemis being slung out of cars and they got holes in the side of the block.
Yep.
I mean, Pete, maybe I'm overdoing it, but I just feel like you're not going to be rich after that deal.
No, I mean, anytime you do anything like that, it's $20,000 to get it back running again. And the truth is, most of those guys are going to split in the finals anyhow. So
Yep.
like that 100,000 very unlikely that's going home in one toter home.
And a Pro Mod crew has a semi with 4 or 5 guys. They're breaking
fuel
third
bill,
members. The fuel, it's crazy. So
And then the people. I mean, if you take a team like the team Lyle's driving for, Scott Tidwell, they've got 2 trailers. They've probably got 20, 25 people running 2 cars, possibly 3 cars. So, I mean, that all adds up to a big, big, big amount.
So kind of the passion drives everything.
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
You have to own a business that's ideally trying to sell parts, and you're advertising your own business. That helps a lot from what I've seen.
Yeah.
It kind of helps you write off as a marketing budget, I guess, in a way. But
What these guys really need are like a Pepsi or a Coca-Cola or like a, Delta to like sponsor them, because it's not even like what we do isn't even like net positive for a race car manufacturing company.
I'll roll out there with the Twix car in a heartbeat. My car is even like this right color, I feel like. A pewter.
Yeah.
You put Twix on the side, it'd be perfect. Or M&M's, something along those lines.
That's what needs to happen with the sport. So
Yeah,
I mean, I
that's
hope
for
that
sure.
I hope that moves in that direction. But
Yeah, the
it's-
only thing, when them Pro Mod racers see 52,000 to win, the only thing pumps them up is that it was more than 51,000. You know what I mean?
Right.
Seriously.
Yeah.
I mean, and next year, if it's 53,000, that's what's, you know what I mean? It's not going to be life
But
changing for
they'd
them.
also probably be here if it was 15.
Sure.
maybe
sure.
less would be here, but
A little
yeah,
bit less, but it's still there. They're
Wouldn't
still
be
here.
as cool because we raced for 50 last year, but
Yeah.
you know
The
what I
50
mean?
kind of just gets the spectators. They're like, holy
Yeah,
cow, they're
excites-
racing for $50,000.
Sure.
It excites
Yeah.
the community.
Sounds
a
so
little bit.
life-changing for the spectators.
Yeah.
He's not wrong. I guarantee you, tomorrow night, you'll watch those little engine cradles being pushed through the pits with $80,000 engines on them, pushing them into different pits to swap motors, and it's just
Even Mark Mickey
It's a
after
sight
his
to see.
after his run, they were putting rods and pistons in that thing and
Yep.
going through everything. It's like people don't, if you understood the true cost of this stuff, it's
Well,
like
it's a turbo car. I thought you just put you don't even do the spark plugs on it.
I mean, when we left today, there was 3 transmissions on the back of his
Yeah.
toter.
Yeah.
Those are
$60,000 in
$60,000
transmissions just sitting on the back of the toter home.
yeah. Not his, but
Yeah.
I mean,
But
he's rebuilding them. Yeah.
Somebody's spent
Somebody's-
20.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just changing transmission fluid, is expensive. So
I know. I try to avoid that as well.
tough in a turbo car.
Yeah. Well, Pete probably could speak on this. Like, you want to take the engine apart probably as much as possible so you know what's wearing before it becomes catastrophic.
Well, especially when it's a new build. Like when it's a new build, it's nice to take it apart early and just see, all right, what's working in here and what can need a little change, So once it's sorted out, a lot of times it can go a little bit, but a lot of it depends on the tune too. Like the better the car is sorted out, the harder it is on the motor.
Well, like Reds, he used to be able to get away with 60 runs on rods. And
Yeah,
then
right.
we learned that wasn't possible anymore.
That's because the things are just faster now and there's more power involved. So that means your rod count gets lower,
When you're going 420s and making 60 passes different than 390s and making 60
totally
passes.
different.
Your list of what's a consumable grows, and suddenly you're like, wait, the block is a consumable?
Yeah.
Well, you got to figure that out before it expires itself, because
Yeah.
when it expires itself, nothing good's left.
Yeah.
Well, that's probably why data helps. I've seen some people look at their laptop and they're like, oh, I got to replace this part in the engine. And I'm like, wow, you can see that on the laptop? That's pretty awesome. I can't see anything on mine.
Try not to turn that on.
Yeah. Or like the, stuff like the Clearview filters and little things like that you guys have seen evolve over time that you can actually tell things are wearing before the rod is out the side of the block.
I think that's why it's so good to have Pete on board with our program, is the builder and the tuner, so they're hand in hand. So it's not, hey man, I got a motor and the tuner comes. You know what I'm saying?
You don't have that Spider-Man meme where they're both pointing at each other.
Yeah.
It's just Pete in his mirror.
And we can come out and we can make a bunch of rips, and then Pete can say, okay, let's pop the motor out. I just want to take it apart and look at this or look at that and make a small adjustment, and that makes the world of difference. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Whereas obviously the alternative is, the rods come out of that thing you bought from whoever.
Yeah.
So,
but the other thing is, for me, that's how I work, right? Because like, if I were relying on somebody else to tune or somebody else to build the motors, I would always, you don't know what's going on.
you'd have that pullback.
Whereas if the same person is doing both, then I get to see, all right, well, when we run a tune like this, the end result is this. So there's a direct feedback loop that I think is crucial.
Didn't you start building motors out of necessity for that?
Yeah, well, I mean,
Because you didn't go to school or anything for it.
no, but yeah, so it all ties together to me. But in my case, like, the reason I'm doing what I'm, at the level that I'm at today is because I blew tons of shit up, and then, we didn't have the money to buy good stuff, so that meant I had to fix it, right? Well, when you're fixing it, you learn pretty quick, all right, we need to figure out a way to not do this again.
I want to go down.
I'm also still running out of money.
Yeah, that didn't change anything. So, that there's a system to that, and that's where I came from. That and the struggle of finding competent machine shops was a big reason that I, have a machine shop.
Yeah, I've talked to a few people like that where they're like, yeah, I just couldn't get anybody to, do it the way I wanted, so I bought all the equipment. And I'm like, that's a crazy next step of...
Well, you have to. And it starts out on a small scale. Like in my case, I remember way back in the day I would have a local shop do valve jobs because I'd started porting my own heads and stuff, but I couldn't do the valve job. Well, I get the heads back sometimes and I could see daylight through them. And I didn't know a whole lot about it, but I figured that can't be right. So then, long story short, I ended up buying a seat and guide machine and doing my own valve jobs, the same machine I got today. And, it was not a crazy expenditure, but that starts the process. And then later on, you're like, well, if I had a head surfacing machine, then I pretty much I could do about anything to a cylinder head. So one thing leads to another.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. I know you guys pretty much same deal, right? Where you're like, well, we need to make parts, so I guess we'll just buy.
We originally just
all the
wanted to
equipment.
design parts and have other people make them, and then we always got put on a back burner. Same deal as Pete, and then so we bought a machine and told Andy to learn how to use it, and then now we got 15 of them.
And you have to learn how.
That was it. We bought a machine, and then I learned how to use it.
So I was going to talk to Lyle about this again, but the No Prep King versus Pro Mod stuff, Do you work on any? Do you mess with any of those No Prep King guys? Because they're pretty close to Pro Mod now.
They are. That's the same thing. I've helped a few of them behind the scenes, as far as the big tire cars, but not. I've never been to the track with any of them yet. As far as a No Prep Kings event.
It seems like the no prep portion is just a marketing ploy at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've
I
seen
don't
them
think
spray,
tracks
I
are
think.
necessarily any different.
Yeah.
I think they spray.
I mean, it's
little
cool.
bit.
It's good for the sport.
It's pretty much just a steel roofed Pro Mod, though. I think that's the only real difference is they have steel roofs, and the rest of it is like as Pro Mod as any other car.
It's no different.
I think in the end of the day, if there's no rules, everything ends up that way.
Yeah,
With a
that's
screw blower or big twins.
You should see the street car class. I mean, you're about to step back into a
Yeah.
full Pro Mod field.
Yeah, I kind of feel outgunned with a little small block, but we'll do our best.
Welcome to the party. I
Exactly.
have 6 cylinders.
Yeah, and I'm being told now that if I don't have a Coyote, I can't compete. So
I'm still trying to ban them from the class. I'm working at Victor a little bit.
yeah,
There
2
you go.
valves per cylinder only.
There you go.
I like seeing the weird combos that step into this kind of stuff. I mean, you probably just work on what, like small block Chevys, big blocks, and like LSs. But then seeing like diesels and 2Js and like 6 cylinders and like weird things like that step into the classes and kind of throw John Sears for a loop is kind of fun to watch.
Well, I've done 6-cylinder stuff. We done actually years ago. We qualified #1 at World Cup with a 6-cylinder at X for Jamie Hacking, which is a motorcycle racer. But yeah, I do 6 cylinders, the 4-valve stuff. And my business partner's a diesel, comes from the diesel world, so I've kind of been drug into some of the diesel work, repair work on some of those blocks and billet blocks. And
You had a
this
top
type of
qualifier mod motor for several years.
Yeah.
Yeah, we do. We've done quite a bit with the mod motor stuff, and
Which that was obviously before the Coyote times, but
yeah,
same rules apply.
yeah,
you
it's
know.
the same.
Bunch of chains,
Yeah,
bunch of
Bunch
guides,
of chains, no brains, and all the chains.
more chains and brains. That's
all
it.
kinds of guides and
right.
parts from everywhere. Every car under the sun. That's what I've learned is like you have to buy mod motor stuff from like a Navigator or like something weird, and it's all weird.
Yeah,
I like the simple world of small blocks Chevys.
Yeah, a lot of times we prefer that because it's just easier to work on, and for most customers, it makes more sense.
Yeah.
But if the rules, have an opening for somebody with a weird combination to come in, I think Ultra Street was it the Mustang with the 6-cylinder from, I can't think of his name, but
The Grand
Eric
National.
Laferiere?
yeah, the Grand National
Oh,
in a
okay.
Fox body. Like
Yeah.
such a weird combo, but it somehow kind of squeezes into
Well,
the
the
rules
thing
just
with
right.
Ultra Street is a very turbo restricted class. So, and when that's the case, you want to make the motor as small as possible, and that's where the 6 cylinders and the
Yep.
mod motors kind of shine.
Dave Fiskus. That's it.
Dave
Dave
Fiskus.
Fiskus, yeah.
I thought you were talking about Eric Laferiere. He was here testing. He's got a 6-cylinder.
X275 with a 2J.
Yeah.
Inline 6. Yep.
Yeah, that thing's badass too.
Yeah.
But they're pulling that thing apart constantly for what they're
Yes.
trying to do. And
But when you got a combination like that, as Pete and Mark Rogers worked through too, you don't get to bounce ideas off of a seasoned racer that's running this, Hemi engine. This Hemi engine, everybody's got them. Oh, this is the head you use. This is the piston design, the rod design. When you're doing something different, it just look at Ryan Milliken in the diesel. Look at how good he's running. But I can remember watching him for several years and me just sitting back there saying, dude, when is this guy going to give it up? When is this guy going to give it up? You know what I mean? And then now look, you know what I'm saying? So just persevere through it. You know what I mean? You just had to force it through. But I think it's truly cool and inspiring to watch.
his is a little different though because that thing's got a lot of cubic inch. It may be a 6-cylinder, but isn't it like a 5.9 or something big? Like
I'm sure it is.
It's a pretty.
At least, yeah,
it's
it's
not like a
Cummins.
3-liter.
But it's still
or like-
unorthodox.
Yeah, of course, it's
It's-
weird and heavy.
Yeah, it's
and-
not like you're going to call, I don't know whose converter he uses, but you're not going to call that company and say, hey, I need a converter for my spec'd out nitrous intercooled 90 pounds of boost,
Yeah.
Cummins diesel in my Nova. You know what I'm saying? You just got to figure that stuff out.
Well, and he's
it
probably
takes
fighting.
runs.
He's probably fighting power management more than
Sure.
the next. I mean, just as much as the next guy or worse.
He was
Like, no
bending
one's
leaf
done it.
springs.
Yeah, he's
Yeah.
twisting leaf springs up.
which is crazy to see. Yeah, that's a cool class though because I think like 76 millimeter turbo is like the biggest you can go
in Ultra.
in Ultra.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
which is so small for a 2J is tough to run that small of a turbo and squeeze out what you need to at that weight. It's like 3,300 pounds or 3,200 pounds with a 76. Like, that's a tough class. But then you start getting into so much of converter stuff. How much have you looked at making converters, Pete? I feel like that's probably your next step.
Well,
I feel like you're just like, I need to do it all, so I guess converters is next.
Well, I don't do converters, but I do have my own converter pressure management system that is on Red's car. Actually, it's on Ryan's diesel.
Okay.
And that he seems to think that was a big game changer for him because it, well, the problem with a diesel is you've got to have a really tight converter to couple that thing and keep it from turning 9,000 RPM because that's not going to work, And this allows you to kind of loosen up a really tight converter and have some control over it. But no, I don't do converters, and I doubt I ever will. There's a lot to that, and I'll let the converter guys handle that.
Yeah, it's kind of a pain in the ass. It's a complicated science that I don't even begin to
Well,
understand.
I joke that nobody knows what happens in that thing.
It's like, just the cloud.
It's like the
The
refrigerator
information
door.
is in the cloud.
I'm glad to hear you say that too,
Probably
Do
not.
you really know why it goes on?
because I don't understand it either. And every time a converter guy tries to tell me something, it's like over my head or in one ear out the other. I'm just like, all right,
Just send
I'll
it to
put
me.
it back in.
Send it to me.
After you weld that thing back together, it's all a guess after that.
Yep. Doesn't light really shut off. We're putting a GoPro in the fridge.
We'll find out.
Yeah, you gotta make sure.
Does it shut off? It doesn't. What's
So-
that
GoPro
switch
probably
for?
shut off.
So does Mickey's record count in testing? I heard that in a comment, and it's tough to say. Record
I mean,
in
it's
testing.
real.
Say what you
It's
will.
real.
It's
It's
real.
real.
Yeah, say what you want.
Yeah.
It's already out there on
It kinda
social media.
depends
It's
on-
happened.
To me, it depends on the record, but in this case, like, there's really no class that's running quarter
Sure,
mile, so
sure.
like it's nobody's going to argue.
Hey, like
Yeah.
any good micro record,
yeah, like LDR,
it's a micro record, but it is cool. It's awesome.
Yeah, like if
Oh, it's
somebody goes,
badass, no question.
if somebody goes 379 in LDR, that's not a record until it's done at a race.
Yeah.
at
Across
an
the
event.
scale.
But
Right.
still, when it's posted on social media and everybody's got it on their eyes,
It's as
they
legitimate.
feel like it's done.
Yeah.
Even though I could sit there and watch somebody post, okay, they went a 79, but it was in testing. So in your mind, you're like, it's not real, but you just seen it, so it happened.
Yeah, if anybody
Whether you
tried to
wanted to see it or not, it happened.
Yeah, but tried to question the legitimacy. It's like it happened. We were all there.
Yeah.
It
But
happened.
you as an LDR racer, if somebody went 79, are you in the back of your mind like, dang, I don't know if I can get there. Like,
Yeah, that's definitely. I mean, that happens. I'm sure.
mean,
That but in max effort class racing, it's like a chess game. It's like something I wanted to comment on before when you were asking Pete about qualifying order. I feel like, you take the top 10 cars in any class, and they could all probably the top 32 could win first round. They could lose first round. But where you qualify on that ladder or where your position is on that ladder, like, starts the pace for the rivalry team that's going to pair up with you. You're trying to get them off of their game. You know what I mean? And if they're outside, they're saying, well, we got Justin or we got whoever first round and he's 4/10 faster. You want them off of their game so they'll screw up. And if you qualify in front of them, that's the advantage you kind of have. And I think the same thing, when you see an ET or a record set that's way out there, it gets you off of your mindset of your goal that you need to be working toward, and it gets you looking at this guy's coattails, which puts you even farther behind. You know what I mean?
Without a doubt, I bet there's a lot of people thinking about taking that record from Mark at this point.
Oh,
and,
I'm sure.
And before this week, nobody had thought about the quarter mile.
Which is a huge distraction,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
You're
It
already
is.
talking about
Sure.
Mark had to put rods in it.
Yeah.
You had to put different chutes on it.
Yeah.
I'm sure they set it up different. Like,
Yeah, I'm sure the gearing in the trans is completely different than what he runs in the 8th mile setup and stuff like that.
Sure.
But it's crazy to think like he wanted to change a car over just for testing to run at quarter mile and then change it back to run at 8th mile because I'm sure it's pretty different.
Well, put himself in the history books.
Yeah, that's true. That car will forever be plastered as.
And he's in the race car transmission business, so it works out good.
That's good advertising.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Well, that's like stick shift racing. Like 3 out of the 5 guys that are front runners sell transmissions. It's like, so you have to sell transmissions, I guess, to be good at stick shift racing.
Or vice
but if
versa.
they're not, then you question your transmission builder too,
Yeah.
right? Like,
That's true. Yeah, you definitely worry about that a little bit. I wonder if like you could kind of squeeze into one of those classes if you had a stick shift in your car, like something like Leroy could kind of, because it has stick shift and because it's an H pattern, would they allow
think
some
that-
weight?
I'd watch it.
differences?
I'd watch somebody try.
Yeah. I think the inconsistency is what would.
Well,
I don't
hurts
know.
you.
What would
Well, I'm not
kill
saying
you
he
on
would
that.
win. I'm just saying
sure.
let
I
him
was gonna say
in.
a lot of those
Sure.
pro mods are, manual transmission with a converter, anyways. But
Yep.
You mean with
okay,
an
yeah.
H pattern?
Yeah, like a real
Yeah,
H
that's not
pattern.
happening.
Not in
Yeah.
Pro Mod, but in like,
Yep.
X2 or in like LDR or something.
I don't know.
Would be the hard way to do it.
I guarantee you probably could have asked Garrett a couple years ago if Leroy would ever go sixes. I think the first time I seen that car, I wouldn't have went nines in it. So I can't imagine him driving it going sixes.
Well, aerodynamics is just destroying it so badly at that back end.
Sure.
Even though it's only like a little bit of time. Have you thought about any data for aerodynamics? Like, can anything like any sensors or anything you guys can kind of put on to see what it's fighting at that top end? It'd be
I don't know.
interesting to know.
Yeah, I know they've had it in the wind tunnel, and it was awful, but I don't know. It's hard to know what that actually does in quarter mile. In eighth mile, I would say, and this is probably an unpopular opinion, I'd say probably not much of nothing, because that thing doesn't. It's only matters for such a small period of time, and it just doesn't show up. But like quarter mile, it's going to be some. I don't know how much though.
Yeah. Well, even the El Camino is not exactly aerodynamic.
Yeah, for sure.
It's kind of a school
Right.
bus looking thing.
But at the same time, Mark Mickey he set a lot of records with his G body back in the day.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's true. G bodies.
Same front end.
G bodies are good.
Yeah.
Doug, where's your car at? What's the story on it?
Should be
What's the
running.
first
I mean,
race?
if we weren't racing all week we've been testing every day this week. So
have.
probably next week I'll have it fired up and hopefully headed to the dyno.
Nice. What's the first race for that thing?
Hopefully sick week, but my baby's due about the same time, so it's going to be a questionable situation.
I feel you on that because my baby's due right before sick week, so it's
Yeah.
kind of like,
Yeah, being it's my first child, I'm just trying to. It's like going through the gauntlet. Do I go to the race?
Don't say nothing you can't take back.
Yeah,
Don't say nothing you can't take back.
yeah. Well, I just don't know if I really want to put my
now
wife
we
through
know,
that. But
now that we know Cooper's going to be at the hospital already.
yeah,
You know what I mean?
Exactly.
There's no need for both of y'all. You know what I mean?
my phone's off. She could be in labor right now.
Hey, Cooper, we take care of this. I'll be back here in a few days.
Exactly. I mean, you got a good
Will you
chance
run an
of
errand
winning.
for me real quick?
Yeah.
If you got a good chance of winning,
Well,
I
but-
think you're got a free pass.
We'll see when the time gets closer. We'll see what Molly thinks about that. But maybe if I can teach her how to change tires, maybe she'll come along with me. That way, it's a little more convenient. But who knows?
Bring the baby.
Yeah.
So, where are we gonna go? I wanted to talk about the no prep side of things. You guys kind of Pete and Lyle got a little into that debate of flashlight stuff. Personally, I hate anytime there's a video that I see of somebody at a drag strip and the tree is off.
Yeah.
That frustrates me.
it's
If
the
you're on the
worst.
street and you got a
It's the
flashlight,
craziest
I get it.
It's the worst of the worst.
But if you're at a drag strip and it's right there,
Yeah.
you're just standing next to it.
Yeah, why back yourself up 50 years? And,
Well,
It's kind of like kicking the corner of your door frame. You can only be mad at yourself if something goes wrong.
Right,
You know what I mean? And they get all wound up. It's like, you knew this was going to happen.
If you're telling me the tire cracked, but there's a light right there and you didn't use it, I don't know what to
Yeah.
say to that.
Well, a lot of people don't understand why I get so upset about that, and the reason is what people don't realize is that if you are at a flashlight race and you're the fastest car there, the way they run the rules, like it's pretty much guaranteed that they're going to take a shot, probably successfully, at the jump and get a half-second head start, and there's nothing you can do about it. And the more they figure it out, the more it happens every round. And you don't understand, like, from their perspective, they're either going to lose and go home or take a shot and maybe come away with it. So there's no incentive to not do it. So
Yeah, if you pull up next to beer money,
got
you know
nothing
you
to
can't
lose.
outrun
Like
them.
you're-
Yeah,
You're going to try to
a
go
lot of
red.
times you're probably not going to pull it off, but like, so then why not take a shot at it? Because if you don't pull it off, then the same result's going to happen either way.
Yeah, especially at these races they're doing $20,000-$50,000 payouts. It's like, why not?
Right. Yeah. So that's from my perspective. I'm just like, man, this sucks. Trying to do that.
Well, with beer money too is if I pulled up next to Beer Money, I don't want to be very close to it. So I'm going to try to get out on it.
He hadn't had his tetanus shots. Right?
There's not a lot to lose on Lyle's end. Yeah.
I've seen Lyle basically have the parachute on his hood of the other guy.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
It's a scary car to be in the lane next to, and there's
Well,
some
and you got to
cars
make sure your
like that.
tetanus shot's up to date.
That too.
Right.
Like Lyle's driving that thing with the full, like he looks at both walls and he's like, I guess I can use anything in between these two walls.
That's it. And that's what it takes to really run at the front of no prep, at least up to this point, you know. And, you know, Lyle's an unbelievably competent driver. So a lot of the tune-ups that I put in that car, I wouldn't put in there if it wasn't, if it was anybody but Lyle driving.
Yeah.
that dude can get it down, you know.
But then it's so different too because there's back of the track, front of the track,
Yep.
kind of prep, track that just had oil on it.
Yeah.
There's so many, like
There's
no
so
prep
many.
is a pretty broad definition.
It is, and that's why, like with Beer Money, we run it pretty much exclusively on front side. We've kind of, stuck our toe in the water of the backside stuff, but when they drug me there, kicking and screaming because it's just so different that it takes a whole different car. A lot of those guys have huge amounts of weight piled in as far back as they can get it to make it work, and like I said, the car is just totally different, and not a lot of people are successful on both ends. Like you either have a really good backside car or the other way around, or you have a mediocre car at both. You know, occasionally somebody manages to pull both off, but it's rare. You know.
Yeah, good old Beer Money. I love watching that car rip.
Yeah.
It's scary though at the same time. Anytime there's an in-car footage, I'm like, maybe I'll skip through this one.
Yeah.
It's like
It's like a
wires-
horror movie. You just got to look away.
Yeah, I see like wires hitting the gas pedal on him. I'm like, oh gosh, what's going on here?
Yeah, it's a unique piece, but that's kind of why we kind of decided to eventually kind of back burner it in the front side deal, because now like that car runs mile an hour in the eighth that it ran in the quarter when it was built, right? And when it did that, it was at the limit of its cage, right? So like it's like I say, it's doing that in the eighth mile now, so we need to kind of back that up a little bit.
Yeah,
Take a second look at safety,
Yeah, right.
at least.
The limit of the cage didn't look like very much.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's just like an 8-point mild steel, MIG together cage. There's literally no subframe connectors in that car. There's no bar down there. There's nothing. And it's incredible. It does what it does, but like, it's nothing special.
We were talking about micro records, and I was thinking about the LS guys or the no time guys that start claiming records. That one really, I get a kick out of that one. He's like, no time guys are like, I got the fastest, stock block LS, and I'm like, well,
How do you know?
how do we know?
You gotta choose one or the other. Yeah.
They're like the sometimes racers now,
Yeah.
where they like show like half of a slip and like pieces and
I
cuts.
love when
of
they
it.
show a slip and it just shows their car number. Everything else is covered up. Like, cool.
Or they don't know that the slip also says the time at the top.
Yeah.
Because all the slips say it at the top,
Forgot
like
that.
a
And then you
little
go on
bit.
the app of the racetrack and
Yeah,
pull
you
them
see
up.
it,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, that's caused some freaking fighting too. I've seen that where
What I don't get on the no time stuff is how a guy can be racing a class one weekend, then no time the next weekend, and then back to a class. It doesn't make sense.
I've done that in the street style stuff, but then like the serious, Streetcar Takeover, love those events, but they let people double enter. No time in Extreme 28s.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense.
Like that really doesn't make sense
Yeah.
when you're back to back running your car. But I mean, it is what it is, I guess. I mean, we all know how fast they're going. You can tell pretty much with a good idea and a good editing. It's tough.
We have the technology.
Yeah, it's a tough deal. Is there any records you are trying to set, Doug? Do you have any micro records?
I think somebody beat
in
me to
mind?
the first 6 second LT record. So
I know.
I'm just happy to be racing.
Nate was going pretty fast. Nate went a couple really fast passes with his.
Yeah, he only went a little bit faster than what we had gone before.
I think he went 50s.
He went 50s, and
Yeah, he went
we were
50s.
bottom 60s a
Yeah.
couple years ago. So.
Yeah.
I mean, we're just kind of trying to run our own game, and I think the thing that gets forgot about drag and drive is just creating a combo that's consistent and gets down the track and goes fast. Like Guys will show up on the first day and not be there on the last day, and you know.
Hey, listen, you know it's hard.
Including me. I've been here. I've been here.
Listen, I've had no headlights on my fair share of Dragon Drive adventures.
Yeah, you followed me for.
Don't remind me. You owe me a lot of
miles.
sleep hours on that one.
Oh my gosh, I had my head out the window with my iPhone.
Yeah.
I was riding the rumble strips for probably an hour. I was just like,
Oh, yeah.
if I'm on the rumble strips, I'm not in the ditch.
Yep.
Yeah.
And
True.
I found out why, but
The
now
number
it's
of
sad.
cops that we passed when you had no headlights and they didn't even look twice at you was staggering.
They couldn't see me.
Yeah.
like staggering.
He's like, it was a stealth Mustang.
They couldn't see me, and it was cold that night too.
oh yeah, it was.
That was a rough night.
Yeah.
That was not fun.
Yeah.
And you guys signed up though this year, I would imagine. Well, you
Yep.
are.
Yeah,
Red,
we're
you
all
going
signed
again?
up.
Oh yeah, if it's going, I'm going.
What about your car? Anything?
I'm undecided. Well, I'm building a new car. I'm building a Monte Carlo, so I'm undecided on what I'm gonna do. I know that won't be done in time, so I'm not sure if I want to drag the GTO down here or not.
Yeah. Pete, you think the El Camino's got it in it again with the new kind of setup?
We'll see.
It's got quite a different combo than last year.
Yeah, that car has just issues with the wheelbase and everything, but
Driver.
as far as sketchy tracks, but I think it can do good. We'll see. It's got some weight out of it, and there's definitely more power in. He went. What did he run the other day? 230 something.
Yeah.
So
that
if we
thing
can-
is spicy.
Add that power to it, it'll help. We just have to see what it does.
Yeah, that was an interesting deal with the World Cup because a lot of people were a little frustrated by him having to go to a faster class.
Yeah.
And I kind of understand it on the promoter side of things because it.
Well, he had to
Billet
go.
block.
He had to. If you have the equipment to go fast,
That's
you should
true.
have to use the equipment to go fast.
Can't be puppy kicking now. Come on.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
it's kind of a tough debate, and I get why people that aren't in the world see it as like, oh, they forced him to do this. But first off, nobody forces you to any race.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, nobody forces you to put 98s on or 94s on your car.
Yeah.
Like if you want to be in that class, you build
Yeah.
a car to go to that class.
And nobody
you know?
held a gun to his head and said you have to show up
Yeah.
at World Cup and run whatever class.
I mean, realistically, Garrett's car doesn't even fit LDR rules. It would be in Pro 275 at this
No.
point, so it needs to be running
Yeah.
360s.
The problem is the
Yep.
car,
And it doesn't go 380s.
It's a super
Yeah.
cool car, but
Yeah.
it's a weird car, and
Yeah.
it doesn't make sense in race classes.
Yeah,
a
when
lot
you
of times,
if he wants to class race, it's just the wrong car for the class.
right, it's just kind of in a hard spot.
It's one of those deals where he built a car and hoped for the class.
Yeah.
Instead of built a car around a class.
Well, and on the same point, he doesn't want people to show up with his same combo because they will, and he won't even be in the he won't even be remotely competitive if other cars with 481X and 94s show up.
Well, what's that other car that went the record on a radial? Mark Benson or something?
The guy
I
from
think.
Canada, yeah.
Yeah, the black Camaro.
Yep.
And
Benson Jr.
yeah, and that's just like a conventional headed big block with twin.
It's
Like
probably got
nothing
98
crazy.
It's probably got 98s or 102s on it. I'm sure it's got a lockup in it.
And it went like 560s, I think. Like that. That's
Yeah.
kind of like proof of what is capable in a way. And I think that was even a step higher than Garrett's class.
Yeah.
So when you look at the data on what guys are doing, you kind of have to make that judgment call.
When you open up rules for a car to get in, you often open a floodgate that you don't really want to open.
Yeah, because
But like I
you could run your
said,
car.
his situation is he's got that wheelbase to deal with, and he's got high mounted turbos in front of the motor. So like if you were going to
Yeah.
try to go after that, you got to make some changes.
Yeah, reality, we all know it's not purpose-built car.
Right,
You know what I
yeah.
mean?
So why does the wheelbase hurt him though? Because some people talk about wanting the wheelbase.
Well, you do in certain situations, right? But his wheelbase is extreme for any situation, But if the track is, if you're on a small tire like that and the track is in any way marginal, your weight is just all the way front, and you're going to struggle. It's hard to get it in. You got to get it back.
Yeah, like a Fox body's 101 inches, so he's 15 inches longer than a Fox body in that car. And
Yeah.
there's a reason people race with Fox bodies.
Yeah.
Then the 315s can only do so much.
Like in a pro mod, you want wheelbase a little bit because you got a huge tire back here and tons of traction. So like you need a wheelbase to help calm things down. But it's the opposite in a radial deal like his. If a track is just absolutely perfect,
Yeah.
it's not too bad. But like anything other than that, it can be a struggle.
Well, even like Brett's car, I think, has a little bit more wheelbase than a Fox body. And those cars seem like they're in the perfect wheelbase. Those S197s, they seem like they have the perfect wheelbase for both no prep. Like, I don't know, it's weird. Mustangs seem like they've always just hit it on the head with like random things like that, like suspension geometry and wheelbases and stuff. But then G-bodies kind of suffer from their... I have an F-body, so if anybody's...
Yeah.
I mean, you got a freaking GTO, so if we're talking about bad chassis,
yeah.
F-body, GTO...
Nobody ever intended an El Camino to do what Garrett's doing with that.
True.
Like, that was
True.
never a thought that crossed anybody's mind.
It's even wrong when you see it do it.
Right.
And
It
it's
doesn't
like...
look right.
It doesn't.
It's a double-edged sword because you're upset because you don't have the proper chassis for the powertrain.
Yeah.
But then if you build a purpose-built car, you have to run up top because you do have a purpose-built car. So it's just a double-edged sword.
Well, and he uses it on so many different things.
Sure, sure.
A purpose-built car isn't going to go do sick week.
Right.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can't run racing pro mods and then also have a radiator that's that big.
Right.
It just doesn't make sense, really. There's probably so much weight in that car with just street stuff. But you guys in LDR, don't you have to have like working headlights and like stuff like that? Isn't it like...
We don't have to have working headlights. You
Or
know what
like-
I mean, I say that there has to be headlights there, but it's not like they come through and say, "All right, turn your headlights on. Let me
Hit the
verify
blinker."
they work." Yeah.
But you have to
Yeah.
have front frame rails.
Yeah, it's
and stuff like
factory
that.
body lines, factory dimensions, plus or minus an inch.
But at 3,300 pounds, all that doesn't really matter anyways, because
Exactly.
you might as well have
Exactly.
full interior.
Exactly.
Like,
Exactly.
Yeah, it doesn't need to be titanium at that
Yeah.
point.
yeah, like what are you gonna do? Like, yeah, cut it all out and then add weight. Like,
Yep.
it just doesn't really make that much sense. You guys both, I feel like, have ruined the Nova markets, though. For sure.
Well, if anybody has
I
one for
wish we had
sale,
cornered
contact
it.
me.
Yeah, I
I'll
wish
give
we
you.
had
I'll put
got
my
it
email
cornered.
in the description below or in the comments section.
Doug's trying to do that with third gens right now.
Yeah.
He's trying to corner that market, but I don't think the third gen was ever going to take off, Doug. I'm sorry.
Oh, you're wrong.
Man.
You're wrong. I predicted
Agree to
it.
disagree.
I
Dude,
can't-
a third gen just sold on Mecum last year for $120,000.
Yeah, that's wild. I just can't fathom the
But
third
I
gen
will also qualify that with they drive terrible, even a low
The
model
most
one.
boring
They're really
cars ever.
boring and underpowered, but they are cool.
What's the selling
Nostalgia.
selling feature? Just the look?
Nostalgia always sells everything.
Man, I can't get
Think
behind
all the
third
cool
gens,
stuff
though.
people did in the
In the
90s
Yeah,
and
but
80s in those cars.
nobody. I mean, I can remember growing up, obviously in that era. You didn't ever see a new. I mean, like today, you go down the road, everybody's got new Corvettes. I mean, there's so many people that can afford to go buy a new Corvette. 25, 30 years ago, you couldn't just afford to go and buy a new Camaro. You know what I mean? So you didn't see new cars like that. You know what I mean? So I think that's what's cool is that generation is now in their 40s and they're looking to buy that car that they couldn't get when
Yeah.
they were freaking 18 and 19 years old.
Their kids are off to school and
Sure.
they're like, man, I
So
had a
they're
lot
not-
of fun in that.
Yeah, so
IROC."
they're not worried that
Yeah.
it is only got a 200 horsepower engine and it drives like crap and gets bad fuel mileage.
Don't
But-
meet your heroes, though. I
Yeah.
feel like you end up in
Go
that.
drive one.
That's
You'll be
100%
so bored.
fact, yeah.
Yeah, like-
including an old G body,
Oh,
any
yeah.
of that.
You put
Even
this
a
car on a
Fortune.
pedestal, and then you're like,
Even a Fortune, like the
Yeah.
baddest Fortunes, turds. You know what I mean?
Whoa,
Like,
whoa.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm talking about like factory original. Like
Fortunes
they're
are
gonna creak
great.
and crack.
No, they're rough. Every panel like factory is mismatched already
Yeah.
because they're 8 different materials. It's like this one's plastic, that one's fiberglass, the roof's fiberglass, the doors.
The thing about nostalgia
metal.
is you remember the good and forget the bad
Yeah.
until you buy
Then
the
you
car
have
off
one,
Mecum
and then
you
you
get
see
it.
all the
Yeah,
bad again.
Yeah. Well, guys, we'll end it off here. This was a lot of fun. Hope to definitely do it again. Where can everybody find you guys at? I mean,
Well, you can find us
Motion
at
Racers.
Snowbirds. You
Yeah.
got to be
Yes.
there this weekend.
Snowbirds, if you're not there, if
I
you're
would-
within like 100 miles of Bradenton or 150, 200 miles, you should probably start your
It's
pilgrimage.
going to be a
You
best,
can't
best
get
place to
here
be
and
this
show
weekend.
up.
Yeah.
That's what I say.
And actually,
The weather's
Florida is
perfect.
like the hub of Allegiant $70 flight. So if you're watching us today,
Oh,
just
yeah.
book that flight and come down.
Yeah, you guys can make it. Pete, you're tuning a lot of stock ECUs now, so if somebody's got somebody's got like HP tuners, you know.
If you put a cam in your Fortune, you need to give Pete a call.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah,
Put a
so-
Ridge Runner in my Silverado.
Yeah, exactly. My website's harrellengine.com, And then YouTube channel is real good at doing stuff.
Yeah, great. A lot of music on there. A lot of information on there. He gets all
Tech
fired
center.
up.
It's kind of a crazy place.
So good stuff. Motion Raceworks. And then Red, do you post anything? You just kind of race?
Nope, that's it.
You race?
You
and
can find me where you
YouTube?
can find these guys.
What
That's
the
right,
heck?
man. I'm telling you.
Man.
Old guy problems.
One of these old school racers that
That's
doesn't.
because all I got time to do is race and then try to go back to work to make enough money to go race again, and then go back to work and make enough money to go race again.
Good deal.
We handle his publicity.
There you
Perfect.
go. Yeah.
All right, guys. Thanks for watching. We'll
Thanks,
see you
dude.
next time.